Last week we went over the AFC and NFC North. If you want to check out how we graded them, check us out at our last video. Also, hi, I love you. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Cheese and Vikes, where we do weekly polls. Is it about today's episode? Follow around and find out. Let's get started with the teams of the NFC and AFC North. Josh, who you got first?
I got the Tennessee Titans. To me, they had the first shocker of the draft. It kind of went as scripted and planned for the first six pick. With the seventh pick, however, they took J.C. Latham, the tackle from Alabama. It's not a shock they went tackle. More shocked of which tackle they went, I feel. To me, protecting Will Levis is, an absolute focal point for the Titans and their team right now. Kudos to them. I liked Fuego a little bit better there, but solid pick, offensive line, maybe a little rich. I could have seen them potentially trade down. The next pick I absolutely loved. Tavondre Sweat, the tackle from Texas.
Ooh,
I didn't know where he was gonna go. I mean, he should have been a first round pick all day long.
regardless, he was a sweaty pick, Josh.
He was. Yeah. Now, like I said, we had some mock drafts with him going in the first round. Yeah, he has an absolutely dynamic first step. I love the pick. They didn't care about his character concerns. They took, a potential Pro Bowl player from day one. The player that stood out to me on the third day the most was Jaquan Jackson, the wide receiver Tulane. To get him in the sixth just tells you how rich of a receiver class it was. He was Michael Pratt's top weapon. I could see snaps day one as a rookie. Overall, solid B minus.
I do think J.C. Latham at 7 wasn't as much of a reach as you might think, but I do think maybe they should have went for another receiver, even though they did sign Tyler Boyd recently. I think he is pretty pro ready at this point, and a lot of people are actually taking him as his number 2 when they started doing mock drafts in the beginning.
No, I mean I like the player. I mean he's going into a great situation. I don't know if you know, but they have hired Callahan from the Bengals to be their head coach. His father, Bill Callahan, is notorious for developing all pro Hall of Fame caliber linemen, so don't be surprised when he is an all pro.
So Texans would trade down before obtaining multiple second round picks from the Vikings. Can't really say a whole lot about their first round until I see the second round pick in 2025, but there has to be some sort of value retained. I don't think the Texans got there with their first pick, but it was an excellent start. In the second round, they would select Kamari Lassiter. When he lined up with Xavier Leggett this year, who I'm going to get into later about how good I think he is, he allowed Xavier Leggett one catch for a total of 3 yards, and he should be an immediate shutdown number 2 for them. One thing I do have to say about him is he doesn't really get a whole lot of interceptions, but he does make a ton of plays on the ball. I always see his hand on the ball. He's just never pulling it in. The next pick the Texans would make, though, would be Blake Fisher. And he is an offensive tackle out of Notre Dame, lined up on the other side of Joe. He is very quick. He jumps off the line with a very quick first step, mirrors his opponents very well, and he doesn't have his hands. He's not super handsy as in terms of holding someone. So I don't really expect a lot of holding penalties from this guy, which is excellent because Texans were seventh in holding penalties last year. And to end day two, the Houston Texans had the mindset that 75% of the world is covered by water, and the rest is covered by Kalen Bullock. So they got the ball hawking safety out of USC. Expect the Texans to be testing offenses with single high coverages this year. And last pick I want to go over for the Texans is Cade Stover in day 3. Personally, second favorite tight end in this draft. I could not believe he fell this far. The Texans' patience really paid off in this situation. I know he isn't Brock Bowers by any means, but he's still really exciting to me. They did build a little bit of depth after that. Nothing that was too essential for the rest of day 3. That's why I'm not getting into it. But until I see what comes out of that trade from Minnesota, the Texans are getting a B minus today.
In terms of draft value, Trent, they came out on top with that Minnesota trade. But I like the grade. Good job, Parker.
Yeah, and I would also say if Vikings just happen to have a bad season, knock on wood, I could bring this up to a B plus if they have a high second round pick next year. But I do actually see the Vikings doing well, so that's why I'm gonna keep them at the B minus.
Next up is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and boy, did I love this draft. Starting off here, they once again a team kind of getting a lot of value picks from the Vikings, trading back from 17 to 23, and still getting Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver from the LSU factory. They they may have taken him at 17. They may have traded up to get him. But to be able to trade back all the way to pick 23 and pick up a third, fourth, and fifth round pick next year, they're gonna have ammo to move all over the board here. Jacksonville Jaguars, they have a great defense. Mason Smith, Javarian Jones, Jordan Jefferson. I know I'm getting into to day three, but those are two players, those three players that will contribute on the defense day one and be great depth and rotational pieces. The two LSU defensive tackles are absolutely going to be stout to help that defensive line. I absolutely love them just loading up on defense, saying our defense is going to be fresh at all times, running people in and out. I am going to just bring this up a little bit early here, something I did notice. 7 out of their 9 picks were from the SEC. Made it clear what they were doing. They were drafting, how last time I talked about the punter from Iowa, another special teams player here in Cam Little. Cam Little from Arkansas is another stud. They should have their kicker for the next decade. I think drafting kickers needs to be encouraged in this league. I give them an A minus.
My favorite thing about that too is definitely the two defensive tackles. I think of them having chemistry already built in when they do stunts and are on the field at the same time. So it's more value for them to take Jordan Jefferson in the fourth round for that reason.
Well, and I mean, Jefferson from LSU, they tend to be ballers. Just
Oh
throwing that
yeah.
out there.
Oh yeah. The Colts had their pick of the defensive litter this year. Laiatu Latu was not a bad start. I would have rather had them take Dallas Turner, but Latu could have more upside. You hear Josh and I talk about it. We get TJ Watt vibes from this. And if we sat down today and went over the 2017 draft and redid it, and you took TJ Watt at number 5, he'd be going too low. The second round, the Colts really inspired me here. They would trade down and obtain 2 fifth-round picks. And somehow Adonai Mitchell fell to them at pick 52. This guy was in the first round in most of my mock drafts and was my personal number 6 wideout. I understand he acts up when he's got low blood sugar. There might be something I'm missing, but this pick on its own is an absolute A plus.
I heard he didn't interview well. It's at pick 52, potential first round pick, wide receiver. I believe he'll jump in and be the top receiver in Indianapolis right away, maybe even over Michael Pittman.
Very, very easily that could happen. But the next thing I want to talk about with their day two is the Colts would give up a 6th-round pick and trade up 3 spots. They'd select Matt Gonglaves to give the O-line a little bit of depth. This was my favorite remaining offensive tackle at the time. And what's kind of great about him is he can slot into either tackle. He can go to right guard sometimes too. He should be a solid depth piece, and at the very least, but it's a very good chance he could start. And day 3, they would add Tanner Bartolini. My first favorite thing about him is that his name rhymes with tortellini. But that's not all. Colts also got a really good pass blocker out of him, and he has the ability to play both guards. So, in those 2 picks they took there, they covered all 5 O-line positions depth-wise.
Anthony Richardson is grateful, to say the least.
He's gotta be, right? So the next thing the Colts would do, though, is they'd trade down in the 5th and obtain a 6th-round pick in exchange. And I just want to bring this up one more time to just add on to the Adonai Mitchell thing. They traded down. They used that 5th-round pick to get another 6th-round pick. So Adonai Mitchell got them 3 more picks. One of the Colts' biggest needs they had was their secondary. They drafted 3 players in the secondary. And here's another stat for you, Josh. It is a 20% chance that you will start when you're drafted day 3. So they got 1, 2, 3 guys in the secondary, which mathematically, did the math here, that's a 49% chance one of them's going to start. So from trading down for Adonai Mitchell, they got a great receiver, and they might have a starting secondary player. I love the Colts draft overall. They improved their offensive line. A minus.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I agree. They got a top 5 pick in most any other draft, and injury concerns, but they like him a lot.
And being clear here too, Josh, if Latu does not have any injury concerns throughout his career, he did get an okay from his doctor that he's got a clean bill of health. If he's healthy, this is A+ for the Colts. I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I agree. They had one of the most stellar drafts out there. I mean, regardless of how Adonai Mitchell turns out, most receivers in the league have a little diva in them, anyways.
Right.
So if he has a little diva just from his blood sugar or whatever, he's gonna be a baller.
I mean, Tavondre Sweat got a literal DUI, and I mean, I would say that's probably a little worse than a bad interview. So yeah,
I mean, I also heard stuff where they said he maybe is not all that coachable. There was a lot of stuff that made him
no,
fall this far. We weren't in the interviews, you weren't in that process, so
fair enough.
who knows? He could, like I said, look at. I'm not saying it's the same kind of situation, but look at Rashi Rice right now. He's in all sorts of trouble. Just
Right,
you want. You thought after his driving incident he would shape up. Well, you just don't know with players and things like that. These people are paid millions of dollars to make these decisions. We can only speculate, and we shall
right,
see. It could be a steal. It could be a DK Metcalf situation where we picked late second round, and people are going to look back in a few years and be like, "How in the hell did that happen?"
right.
The New Orleans Saints. To me, this is just a very top heavy draft for them. But they got Talise Fuaga, my number 2 tackle in the draft. To get him at 14, my mind was blown. J.C. Latham, Alu Fanchi going before him. Don't get me wrong, they're going to be solid players in the league, but Fuaga to me is just a nasty old school lineman that I personally like his play style. He'll anchor that line for years to come for the New Orleans Saints. I love that. I love him. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. Kool-Aid McKinstry at pick
Oh
40.
yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid McKinstry. Early in this process, he was considered a potential top 10 pick. And I really still don't know why he fell this far. Maybe the upside of Terrion Arnold and all that pushed him down the board a little bit. To get him at 41, he is going to pair very well with Marshawn Lattimore. To get Kool-Aid McKinstry and Luis Vaga, those could be cornerstone players for the Saints. And with their cap problems, I think it's a home run. This is why I'm not giving them an A or even an A+ is they didn't have a pick until the 5th round after this. And guess who they picked with that first 5th round pick? Spencer Rattler, the quarterback from South Carolina. All right, so hear me out with this. Derek Carr is a very, very uninspiring quarterback at this point in his career. There's not much excitement, not much potential. He's not leading you to a Super Bowl.
Like in a statistical standpoint, he is uninspiring. Is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
no, it's just there's not so it's nothing to get too excited about with the quarterback situation in New Orleans. But you take a very low risk, potential high reward pick in Spencer Rattler. The quarterback has an NFL arm. He has an NFL arm, and people are mortgaging their futures to move up for a quarterback. And Derek Carr struggles. They're a floating around 500 team. Throw him in there and see what he's got. Like, the very least, if you're picking high next year, you'll pick a quarterback, but throw him in there. Take a flyer. He was a potential number 1 overall pick when early on in his career at Oklahoma. And to me, I think he has matured. That Netflix special painted him in a very bad picture. Say what you want, but a fifth round pick, that is change for a potential franchise quarterback. The guy's got a cannon of an arm. Bub memes, to me, he didn't look very good at the NFL Combine. I kind of, when I watched the Combine, most players, I can't really tell, but he did look kind of bad in my opinion. So, but it's a fifth round compensatory pick, so it is what it is. But the player that I loved late in the draft for they got was Christian Boyd, the defensive tackle from Northern Iowa. I had so many Vikings fans wanted this guy. He comes from the FCS, played South Dakota State. If you actually watch the tape, he gave Mason McCormick a run for his money. One of the only players to do so in the FCS level. To me, just looking at it, he's probably not going to be a starter in the league, but he will be a key rotational piece for the Saints. He will, I would say 3 to 4 sacks a year kind of guy. But to get him, in the sixth round, pick 199, isn't that the Tom Brady pick?
It
It's a
is. It is the Tom Brady pick.
it's the Tom Brady pick, and this guy is going to be a solid player, and he's going to sign $8 million contracts after this just because he's going to be so valuable as a situational pass rusher. So the Saints, B plus, very top heavy. Loved what they did. Liked a lot of their day 3 picks also. Just the middle rounds they didn't have much, so that's why they get a B plus.
The Falcons.
Who
Holy
they?
cow, the Falcons. Holy cow, the Falcons. So
Where's
they took
where?
Penix, the second left-handed Michael they'd taken the first in franchise history. And I think this might be a good long-term decision. I will do a little bit of defending Penix, but I just can't say much else nice about this pick. I understand Kirk is a 36-year-old quarterback, but I think he's got something left in the tank to maybe go for a couple more years. I thought the Falcons were going to take a piece to maybe add to their team and take them from division favorites, but this could make them at the very minimum quiet contenders or maybe even contenders if they would have added another piece to their team to start. The goal is to win a Super Bowl. Why don't you win one right now? You got the number 8 overall pick. There was plenty of defensive talent on the board. There was Romo Dunze on the board. You could have gotten yourself another wide receiver. And here's the perspective with it too. If Cousins starts for another 2 years, Penix will get plenty of time to develop, and that'd be great. But his first start would be at age 26. No, that's not super old, but that is kind of a late time to start. He had 3 big injuries as well. His health is also kind of a concern in that too. He has a couple flaws that I think are very easy to fix with a year or two of development. He does not ever escape the pocket. He probably sits a little bit too long. He had 2 receivers go in the first and second round, and he had 2 tackles go in the first and second round. So he'd been having a pretty good time sitting in the pocket. But he's not going to be able to be as patient in the NFL with that. They fix that. I think he'd be great. And then I think if they work on his arm talent, in the shorter throws, he'd be great. But when it comes to that deep ball, the man has got a deep ball. It is so perfectly placed, and you can't teach that very well in the NFL. So what I will say is we'll come back to this in the future about how good this pick was overall. And he could possibly open a whole new Super Bowl window for the Falcons that Kirk Cousins is not going to be able to maintain for a couple years. And then the second round, they had this opportunity to take Johnny Newton. He was still on the board,
We
and
both liked him.
we both liked him. I mean, a lot of people like Johnny Newton, but they take the more raw prospect, Rook or Horror. So again, yeah, it's hard to say, guys. He
My
is
my
he is a
sister
decent prospect, but you could have gotten him in the end of the second round. There wasn't a reason to be taking him this early. They probably could have traded back and obtained some more picks.
they
But
traded up. If you didn't know that, they traded way up to get him.
They did trade up. That's right.
They traded up to get this man.
That
So
was right. They did trade up. I forgot about that. They definitely did because they were at the 8 and they jumped all the way to like 4, didn't they? Like right where that's right. They traded with Washington, didn't they?
and I think that they gave a pretty good, like very good draft capital to move up. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was not cheap.
Yeah, of course they would. Well, I do want to talk about the third round because the Falcons actually started doing things, I think, right at this point. They took Braylon Trice, who has short arms, which I get it. Having short arms makes you a little bit gives you some disadvantages in wrapping up and pulling swim moves off, but his ability to bully blockers and pursue the ball just really more than makes up for his arms. He's and I'm not done until they blow that whistle kind of guy. He's just a real go getter. So I don't think the Falcons should be too worried about him, and they actually got a pretty good deal here. And day 3, they would start off very well too with Brandon Dolores, and he is maybe the best value pick the Falcons got at this point. He could have went around the same time as Braylon Trice did in round 3, but he made it all the way to day 3, and he is just such a versatile lineman. He plays edge, he plays D tackle, and he put some pressure on that Washington offensive line too, which is a pretty good offensive line. And he has just got active hands for days, so you will be expecting him to swat the ball down here. I really think this guy could have went early third round easily, and people wouldn't have flinched. So the rest of day 3 was not impressive though, as the Falcons would just draft below the consensus line. And I just don't really know a whole lot about these players. But I'm okay with taking teams' risk after round 4, so I'm not going to dock them too many points in this situation. I just don't think their first 2 picks were the best players to give them playoff success this year. And I feel the Falcons were in a win now situation, and they're in this indecision of to rebuild or to develop their team more. I don't know what their grade is going to be in the future, but right now I'm giving it a D because why not get the championship right now?
That's a pretty fair grade. I mean, a couple of years we could be all super wrong about this. They could trade Kirk
Right.
Cousins before the season. If Kirk agrees, trade him to a team, you know, if someone will take him in his contract, which is probably the thing that won't happen. I am so grateful to be out from him, and I'm as a Vikings fan, I am so pumped to be out from underneath the Kirk saga, and Atlanta, enjoy, buddy. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady's old team. I've been talking about Tom Brady a lot. Anyone catch the roast? That was pretty damn funny. Anyways, there was a lot to like about this draft. To me, Graham Barton, the guard center from Duke, wherever you want to play him. To me, he's going to be an All-Pro, Pro Bowl guard. There's no doubt in my mind that at the very least he's a Pro Bowl guard. The more I watched him, the more I, researched him, the more I grew to love him as a player. And to get him at 26, it will prove to be the steal of the draft. I'm already making a bold prediction here. In redrafts years down the line, he will go top 10. You can't go wrong with, you have Tristan Wirfs and now Graham Barton. Your line is looking pretty good. Baker Mayfield has got to be happy. In the second round here, they took, Chris Braswell, the linebacker from Alabama. Linebackers like that, like his play style, or a dime a dozen. But to me, he will excel, and he'll be a 100 tackle player in this league. You know, and then continuing on with day 3, a player I loved. You mentioned earlier the Washington receivers, Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk, winning round 2. Well, they had another one, and someone I'm actually more of a fan of than Jalen Polk. Jalen McMillan. To me, I was really hoping he would slide to the 4th round for the Vikings to pick, but he didn't. I think he is going to potentially look at replacing Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin might, like I said, I've seen a report since I actually typed this up that Godwin may look to slide into the slot, which leaves McMillan out wide. He's kind of a Mike Evans, poor man's Mike Evans, and I think Tampa's gonna love this kid. Also, the next today 3 here, Bucky Irving, the running back from Oregon. He was a consensus top 5 back in this draft, and he to me gives Devin Singletary kind of vibes, and I think that's just a good value grab in the 4th round. He'll be a productive back for them. There were some people that were higher on him. Like, he had a kind of a poor combine, but who cares for a running back of how their combine is? If he's a player, good vision, he'll be a great pick for them. To me, solid draft overall for Tampa. I'm giving them a B. Just feels right. Graham Barr, just come back to this. He's going to be an All-Pro, Pro Bowl player for them for years to come.
Now that you say that, I'm much, much higher on the pick for that Oregon running back. You said his name was Bucky Irvin,
Bucky
right?
Irving, yes.
Bucky Irvin. Yeah. So you sound like he had a pretty good combine. I don't know much about him personally, but you make me like that pick a lot because people might say, "Oh, Tampa Bay has Rashad White," and fantasy people might be excited to have Rashad White, but he averaged 3.6 yards per carry last. He's
Yeah, no,
not a very good running back.
like, to me, I mean, in my opinion, Bucky Irving has just as much, if not more, potential than Rashawn White. I truly believe it. He, like I said, there was times, like, early on where he would be one of the top 2 running backs selected. He is very dynamic at Oregon, and like I said, don't be surprised if he kind of
Just starts.
pushes put yeah, no, don't be surprised, or at the very least split carries with him, and soon to overtake it. I like the pick. It's one of the first backs in a while for Tampa Bay. They've kind of been in running back purgatory for a while since Leonard Fournette, and to me this
Before
is
that, it was
one of the
Dougie.
first ones that I think I shouldn't have been telling you about him, because I think I could have stole him in fantasy, our dynasty draft.
Yeah,
So
probably.
yeah, I shouldn't have told you all this about him. So yeah, but there we are.
Fantasy advice for all you people out there looking for sleepers. Let us know if you want some of that content. So, last team of the night here, Josh, is the Carolina Panthers. And
Boo.
they really surprised me, actually. They traded up in round 1. I did not expect them to do that, but once they did, I was calling Leggett's name at the draft, and Panthers are running to the podium to get him. After the big three of Odunze, Harrison, and Neighbors, he is the next best receiver, in my opinion. I think he is absolutely amazing. He could have flown off at any time after pick 17. He reminds me of Debo Samuels, but I really think he's going to be better than Debo Samuels. He's going to open up that offense to loads of possibilities and then should line up with Adam Thielen and the newly added Deontay Johnson. You know, Leggett's got a big it factor, and you could see in the future where he has playoff games and he touches the ball 15 times, getting handoffs, getting passes, all that good stuff. He's he's going to be a big player for them. I really believe in him. But day 2, Panthers would trade up again and obtain arguably the best running back in the draft with Jonathan Brooks. Most consensuses actually say he is the best running back. It was a good time for him to come off the board, and Panthers' running offense was in the bottom half and barely broke 4 yards per carry. This guy's a step in the right direction. We haven't really seen anything too impressive from Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard on this team. So I think switching up a running back and getting what might be the best one is a great idea. Round 3, they decided to work on their defense a little bit, and they got Trevin Wallace, the coverage linebacker. And a lot of people don't know this about the Panthers. They were first in pass defense last year. I really like them putting him in as a depth piece. Favorite pick by the Panthers, other than the Leggett, because nothing tops the Leggett pick. I think it was one of the best picks in the draft, honestly. They would blow me away by taking Jatavion Sanders, the Texas tight end. And one reason I was blown away is because I actually didn't know he was on the board. I literally assumed he went off in the second round. I just don't know how I missed it. Most people were saying middle second round for this guy, and he's got really good body control. I mean, I see him go up for off balance catches and coming down with them. He's surprisingly quick, very elusive. He's very powerful and loves to truck people. But speed wise, he only ran a 4.69. But with all the receiver additions the Panthers have put on, I don't see that being too big of an issue. The last pick I want to talk about for the Panthers was Michael Barrett in the 7th round. He is an undersized linebacker, but considering where he was drafted and being on the championship team this year with a pretty stout defense, I think it's a great value pick. We could see him compete with Wallace, maybe even paired with Wallace. He's probably going to play with a chip on his shoulder, and we'll see where he goes. And my favorite thing I want to mention about the Panthers is think of their tight end, running back, and wide receiver trio now. They'd have Leggett, Sanders, and Brooks. You could see them being one of the better trios in the league down the future. So Bryce Young is out of excuses. And this last ranked pass offense needs to improve this year. So we're going to find out if Bryce Young is the problem or if last year's offense was the problem. So when it comes to grading this, we graded the Browns based on the Deshaun Watson trade. So I have to grade this based on the Bryce Young trade. They had a chance at Caleb Williams. It is an F of a move at this point, but no one saw it coming where they were going to be last place this year. They had a lot of games that were really close and that just didn't go in their favor. For not getting Caleb Williams, it does knock them down. I could have given them an A otherwise, but they're getting a C.
Yeah, no, you like this draft. We're kind of way off on this draft, on our opinions on this draft. To me, I mean, I don't think Xavier Leggett was even the best receiver on the board at that point. I personally liked McConkey a little better than Leggett. I also like Keon Coleman better than Leggett. You know how much I love Keon Coleman. He went the very next
Oh yeah,
pick actually, but
which still a good pick, but
I don't
like I
know.
said,
I
I'm higher on Leggett. He is my number 4, and I will not have my mind changed on that. I am totally aware of who else there was,
Yeah, no, I
and I
said you were
even past Brian Thomas, and I'm dead serious. I think he's got that potential.
seeing. Like I said, I even liked Adonai Mitchell a little better than Xavier Leggett, but
A lot of people did, and the more I looked into Leggett, the more I loved him.
yeah, no, you
That's what
say
I'm gonna say.
Debo Samuel. To me, he's a poor man's not Antonio, AJ Brown. That's where I think is a poor man's AJ Brown. That I think is a ceiling, but we shall see.
But that's all we have for tonight, folks. Join us next time when we do the East. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Make sure to take the like button out to a fancy seafood dinner and never call her back. Also, comment and subscribe. Every little bit helps. And have a good night.